All right. So what month is it? February. Welcome everybody to the Maker Roundtable for February 2024. Getting back into the swing of things. We will kind of dive in. Actually, Hunter, I am going to put you on the spot for a second. And if your internet will support you, I'd love you to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, and how you're finding all of this. So, but bear with us, Hunter's internet has been not the strongest.
So is it working? Is it okay?
So
Can
far.
you guys hear me? Okay. Hunter, I'm an OT student from the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. I'm currently working on my capstone, and my focus is just to but my focus of the capstone is to just learn more about assistive in educational environments, become aware of how they can be implemented, learn how to, I guess, kind of modify and adapt, and really just kind of become more invested in this entire, I guess, world.
Nice. So Janice did tell us a couple of the things you're working on. You want to tell us those?
So the big thing I'm working on right now is this project where we refurbished or people's old assistive technology, refurbish it, and then try to families who need it without any cost. So we're kind of in the early process of getting that set up. All just kind of going out into some schools, working with some kids, getting them in need, and just learning more about it just throughout the 14 weeks I'm here.
Great, great.
What sort of devices are you refurbishing?
It can be really anything. We haven't set it up, so
okay.
But it could be anything from wheelchairs, power wheelchairs, standers, anything like that.
Okay.
So will you be doing things like adding new grips or adding 3D components to hold school supplies? I mean, like, do you know kind of what what you might be getting into yet?
In terms of like, I guess refurbishing it, mainly I guess simply like clean up the equipment itself and just making sure it's clean. Right.
Okay.
Thing, we would definitely probably try to either buy them from the manufacturer itself or modify.
Yeah. All right. Well, since you'll be there for, you just started, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this hopefully will be a good resource for you next month. You know, by then you'll probably have some questions, and
Yeah.
There's some folks with some experience. I will say in the line below me on my screen. No, but I mean, we all bring different things, and you know, so as you have questions, feel free to you know, have them, bring them here. This is to me, this is a great spot. Yeah, and everybody comes with a different background, which is nice. So yeah, welcome. And oh, the one last thing is Janice said you're gonna try to make some specialized seating out of cardboard, which I would love to hear reports back on. If you really,
she just mentioned to me like yesterday, so I'm kind of really just have no.
So what you're saying is you and I have about the same amount of information on this.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Well, has anybody else done anything with cardboard making seating?
Well, you know, I've been making
Yeah,
my switches out of cardboard.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so what I've heard, nice.
Those aren't the switches, but I used my Cricut and took symbol stick symbols and turned them into SVGs. And then cut it
Yeah,
out on my Cricut.
nice. I've heard that for building furniture, you need to use the triple walled cardboard. And I don't know, I mean, you could probably do it with standard packing cardboard. Um, I suppose it's just a strength thing and how easily it folds and things like that. But I have never tried to build seating, only, more like Jessica, um, iPad stands and, different things like that. So,
Hey,
yeah,
Scott.
love to hear more about it. Yeah,
Scott, so that's just, it's an excellent segue to a question I have.
perfect.
So I participated in Cole's meeting yesterday of the tamales,
Oh,
and which is, and the topic came up mostly because, well, it was part of the presentation that was made, but also one that I am really sensitive to, and that is liability. And so the thought of making seating out of cardboard,
mhm.
The thought of refurbishing assistive technology, those fall right into that category of, my goodness, how you manage your liability. And so what I'm hoping to get out of as many people as I can is any documentation that they have written, that they are planning to use to protect themselves from being sued for failure of whatever they do. I was reflecting the other day that we produce, I don't know what the multiplier is, but I know we produce many times the number of lawyers in the United States than we do engineers. So I contacted Chad Lehman at Makers Making Change. I asked him, do you guys have anything? And he sent me some links to some things that he said probably aren't what I'm looking for. But so I'm curious to know from you guys, and Hunter can jump in if he has any knowledge of, how are you guys protecting yourself from lawsuits? Scott, how do you do it? You do this kind of stuff.
So interesting, because I was just talking with somebody this morning about liability issues. So I was on a webinar last week that Therese Wilcombe did, and she got a direct question about liability, which I've never heard her discuss liability before, but it was a direct question. A lot of people in the audience were in the healthcare field, I believe. And she said she's spoken to her lawyers, and that if you're not selling your solutions, then she made it sound like that's a distinction, that you are protected under the Good Samaritan rule.
Okay. By the way, Good Samaritan I did research on Good Samaritan. It doesn't protect you at all. It doesn't protect, the only person it protects is a healthcare worker or a doctor at the scene of an accident. That's the only thing it protects.
So that's what I found, except for, I think I still have it up, except for Cornell, who the first line says, under the Good Samaritan rule, if a Good Samaritan provides services for another, either gratuitously or for compensation, the Good Samaritan assumes a duty to use reasonable care. The Good Samaritan may be held liable if they are negligent in providing those services or if their negligence causes injury. But then it goes directly into the bystander stuff, which to me is what the Good Samaritan rule is. You help somebody in an emergency situation.
Yeah, but it can't be just anybody helping anybody. And this, if you look at the history of the Good Samaritan statutes, they were put in place because doctors were not helping at accident scenes on the highway. They were afraid they were going to get sued. So all these laws, and from my reading, it's pretty consistent across all 50 states. These are for emergency situations. They're not for, you have a need,
Right.
and let me see if I can help you with that.
Yeah,
They
that's
just don't apply.
that's what I was reading until I got to this Cornell page. Yeah, I'm very curious how she, her lawyers basically interpret that in a way that would cover.
I I just love the fact she can claim, well, I talked to my lawyers. Wow, that's special. I guess, especially, I suppose it's university lawyers, but
Probably.
yeah, I'd love to have lawyers.
Um,
So, I mean, what are you doing? Are you relying on something you heard from Therese Wilkham?
Well, I tend not to do anything that is weight bearing, that is like specialized in a way that, I don't know. I mean, seating is one of those things. Like, I know how very, very particular seating needs can be. I used to have a boss who would make me raise her or lower her armrest a quarter of an inch, and like that was a make or break for her, so like it can be so very, very particular. And I don't do that.
Okay, so you're saying you guys don't have, and you work for
A
you work
state.
for the state,
Mhm.
and they don't have any paperwork, they don't have any waivers, they don't have any contracts.
So I've been here 4.5 years, and I wrote some stuff up. I took it from my old job, I modified it, and I make people sign when I give them a magnifier. I'm giving you this, you're signing saying that you're accepting it as is with no liability. That I've written it up. I
Can
am
you
not
send
an
that to
attorney.
me? Can you send that to me? I'll claim I have a lawyer, and his name is.
I am not a lawyer.
And I'm curious, Scout, with you working at Missouri's the ATAC program, this is kind of less about making, but more so about like the uh like assistive technology, recycle, refurbishment, at least in the case of Texas. We kind of have like a separate entity that we subcontract with. And basically for basically durable medical equipment refurbishment. So more so like it's kind of separate from AT, but like
Yeah,
more of those like those heavy duty like
yeah,
wheelchairs, rollators, kind of stuff. But they have like they're certified by the state to be like the only essentially only the only entity that can like have these strict standards around cleaning and refurbishing like heavy duty kind of medical equipment. So I'm kind of curious how it works in other state AT programs.
well,
Because
I'll tell
like
you. So
ours isn't in-house. Like we're based out of the university, UT Austin, whereas like this is like down San Antonio. And they've
yes,
done this but like well before we subcontract
right.
them.
So at Missouri Assistive Technology, we subcontract with 10 agencies to do reuse. And I talk to them, and we talk about like how to clean and how to determine if something is safe. But I am doing that, right? This is my job. I'm not an OT. Um, I sometimes say I play one on Zoom. Um, but for 10 years I did that. That was my job before moving into this role. And I took it pretty seriously, but I would throw all this equipment in the back of my truck, take it to a car wash, spray it all down, the non-motorized stuff, bring it back, sanitize it, and give it out, and make people sign a liability waiver. Nobody got out with equipment out of my office without signing. And I know it doesn't hold much water, but a liability waiver that came from another agency that had attorneys. I didn't really have an attorney. So it was as strong as it could be. And I, for those 10 years, I gave out thousands of pieces of equipment and never had anybody come back on me. I got here, they were giving things out, and they didn't sign anything. You're just handing it over. And so I was like, okay, if I'm giving out a rollator because they are using it for support, I want some kind of liability something. So I wrote one, and that's what I do. My boss said, okay, we'll send this somewhere and have somebody look at it at some point, and I don't think we ever did.
So,
but-
I mean, I've heard the statements from a lawyer say, those things are not worth the paper they're written on in court. And maybe the state can function that way. I don't know how a university functions that way. They're very risk averse, universities.
Right. Well, and Therese works for a university.
Right.
So AT programs are either housed at a university through the state or freestanding. New Jersey is freestanding, as I understand it. So we've got a rep from each style. And we're all tasked to do reuse. That is one of our things. Hunter, are you through a university or state or freestanding? Do you know? Oh yeah, you're a university, right?
I'm a student, but the side I'm at, LTVC, they're freestanding. They're like an educational cooperative.
Okay.
But they do like contract with the state.
Okay.
So I would love to have you follow up with Janice, I guess, I don't know, and say, Janice, how do we protect ourselves from a liability standpoint, or from, God, the word is evading me right now, being sued? How do you indemnify ourselves in this effort?
Yeah.
Because I'll be a really bad witness. Tell her that on the stand.
Well, I mean, even cleaning, I used to once a year do a wheelchair wash, but I didn't trust necessarily my staff to do that. If it's a manual chair, that's one thing, but a power chair, like I want to wash that power chair because I don't want to have to replace circuitry or batteries or, anything if they take a hose to the controller,
But worse yet, Scott, you don't want to be responsible if halfway up the ramp, finally the electronics give out because it wasn't properly protected. And
Right.
I even think when I look at Ron and I look at Jessica and I think, it's not just that wheelchair. It's the thing you're controlling with that switch you made. What if
Right.
your switch fails?
Yeah.
And as a result, there's injury.
Mhm.
That's why my mom doesn't let me sell them or give them out.
But I said earlier, I don't believe that is the distinguishing point here. I think, and can somebody, how hard would it be for some lawyer to say, you clearly were negligent? I mean,
Mhm.
where's your background? Where's your certification in switch design? Where's blah, blah, blah? They would tear you apart.
Right. I mean, there is lots of potential for bad things to happen. I tend to be a glass half full kind of guy, and I think when I'm helping people, they're thankful, and mostly they are just going, okay, this is working, and we're all good. I am curious, Ron, if you have a weigh in here.
Yeah, well, because before I got into AT, I did software development for a long time and consulting. So with that, I carry professional liability insurance for errors and omissions. So if a project goes awry, I would have that sort of protection. Honestly, on the making stuff for ATAC side, there's a reason why I make mostly gaming controllers, and it is specifically because of liability.
Wow.
I will not touch things like wheelchairs or things like that. Now there are projects, and that's specifically all of my stuff that I charge people for. Let me put it that way. Anything that I sell is typically an input device, and it's an input device for an Xbox or a computer. It's not an input device for a wheelchair. Okay.
Right.
For projects that are kind of beyond that scope, I do more of a consulting role, and for example, Ken, you heard Antoinette's thing yesterday with a couple of like the bed controllers. I don't sell those directly to a client. I sell those to her, and she assumes the liability for the installation.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
she's got liability insurance because she has to, because she's a provider of this equipment. And some of it is mitigated. It's also, we're very, very careful about where the line is. For example, if you're controlling a bed has limit switches. Okay, so if the bed's limit switches fail, that's the bed's problem, right? That it becomes a who to blame at some point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of blame to go around if you're a good lawyer.
Right. Oh yeah. You could.
And even your switches, I'm thinking, so you just have an input, but let's pretend your input was to, those devices that convert that circuit closure to 110 volts to drive a blender.
Right.
Okay. So they don't convert it; they just control whether the flows. Okay, so your switch fails, and it fails by shorting out.
Right.
So you've got that blender going and going and going and going and going, and burns, and the fire starts, and you thought all you did was make a switch.
Right. That's why I don't make switches. I make joints.
No, dummy.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and it's a big risk that anybody who does the DIY route has too, is, oh my, you try to solve one problem and you're creating another.
Yeah.
And while what I've found a lot is the end user is perfectly happy to take the liability because they need it.
Right.
But you got to watch out for the angry siblings or parents or whatever, and that's why the eye gaze alarm got killed off, because, and again, that was another one where I was not going to sell it directly, but I was going to provide it to another organization.
By the way, Ron, you might want to get a lawyer, and only because I'm not sure that the fact that you're providing it to another organization protects you.
It probably doesn't, but it's a risk I'm taking because I find more value in providing it than worrying about it.
We're clearly all taking the risk, right?
Right. And it's in my mind, I create a line of things that I'll touch and things that I don't touch.
Right. Yeah, I
sometimes that line moves around. I mean, one other company asked me to design a switch controlled go-kart that you'd put down a hill. And I'm like, you want to talk about dead man switches and worrying about things. Let me tell you, there's a lot to worry about there. And
Hunter, how you feeling? You feeling better about your capstone project?
Yeah, and the billion-dollar company who was asking for this, their lawyers said no, not going to happen. And they had plenty of insurance. And this was for like an event. It was to show off a NASCAR event. It was one kid, one thing. But oh yeah, the sorts of requests. I got another guy who wanted to do hand brakes on his car. He does hand controls. He wanted to be able to spin circles and have an automated hand brake. That's another one. I said, well, I'm sorry, but I can't help you with that.
How long did that decision take you?
Well, at first I thought about it and I was like, man, this is a really cool concept.
Right.
And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to kill someone. And I said, no.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to drone on. So if anybody on this call or anybody who watches this in video on YouTube, I'd love to see whatever you have written up. If it's a web page, if it's a document, if it's anything, I'd love to see it. I'm trying to bring together this information because right now, I believe the only solution you have is personal liability insurance of some kind, umbrella or whatever. You got to get it yourself.
Yep.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, like I think there is, listening to some of the requests you've had, Ron, to me, it seems like it would be fun to do a lot of things
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, there's a lot of like wild and wacky things that could be done in the world. But most of us, you know, are doing just like, you know, the more mundane things, you know, like what did we talk about one time, you know, clipping your fingernails, you know, and I think there is a lot of, you know, just like good faith, good effort trying to help for most of the maker space, but it still doesn't, it doesn't make it safe, you know. Yeah, we for the first time did a whole Switch adapted toy program and or you know event, and I had a high school kid and a capstone student working with me, and I had to actually pull apart some of the toys just to check the wiring
Mm.
because you know, I'm like, if he didn't wire these, if he didn't, you know, insulate these properly, this toy could catch on fire and like it was just terrifying.
Right.
And I did find one that wasn't wired well. And, you know, I mean, just that it's not enough to make me not do it again, but it's enough to make me maybe not use a high school student.
Well, it's also, I mean, talking about particular situation, so many things have lithium ion batteries now or chargeable batteries. And those things, if you short them out for a split second, they drop so much current through. You know, I've accidentally hit stuff and it burned my hand in less than a second. You know,
Wow.
at least with a C battery or a AA battery, it might warm up a little bit, but it doesn't really have enough power to boost all at once. But oh, the lithium ion stuff, like I won't convert anything that has a rechargeable battery
Huh.
because it's too much of a risk. I've tampered with it then. Did Ron short something out? You know.
Right. And that's, you know, these are all really good things to, you know, that a lot of people just don't know. Like, where is your line? Um, yeah.
And the line kind of moves. I mean,
Yeah. Right.
it depends on the situation, you know. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, anybody could sue me for anything if they wanted to. I don't know what they would get out of me. I'd give them a cat or something, but I don't really have a lot you could take. You know, in Texas, you have homestead laws. You can't take my house. So,
Yeah, but I mean, does that mean if you do have assets, you can't be a maker? You know, I mean,
right. And theoretically, yeah. I mean, it could mean that I get wiped out.
yeah.
But, you know, that could be any number of things. I could kill somebody driving a car.
Right.
At some point, you got to balance the risk.
Gee,
Yeah.
Scott, is your glass still half full, or after that discussion? You kill
Oh,
somebody driving
oh,
a car.
yeah, and I am not that easily swayed out of my
Okay.
sunny disposition.
It's one other thing I'd add is when I start getting into something that I get a little nervous about, I will hand off that part of it to the end user. Like I have an end user who had, I think I showed it last time, had a Bluetooth switch that he wanted to switch his keyboard or whatever. You know, it wasn't, but he wanted it mounted on his wheelchair. And I said, nope, you and your dad could work on that. But I didn't send this to you. And that was a donated one. I didn't, so I'm covered by Samaritan, haha. But you know, that was one where I said, no, you guys want to break your wheelchair, you're used to it, fine. But I didn't send you a mount. I didn't, you know, do
Yeah.
any of that. So
Yeah, and that was something that came up in this webinar that I was at in the chat, was a lot of these folks who are in the medical field were saying, these are great ideas. I would give this idea to the family to do. Like instead of me doing it, say, yes, your brother needs this. Here's how you do this.
yeah,
And
it's like when I put on the AT Makers thing, when somebody has a wheelchair question, I'll say, well, I've heard that if you searched for this, you might find something, but personally, I can't. I mean, it's silly, but
No endorsement.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure it'll protect you in court, Ron. Don't worry.
Well, yeah, I know, but at least I was you know, trying. I tried.
Right, you're giving them the information.
Right. They could have
them
searched
to-
on the internet on their own. I don't
No,
know if
and
they read my message or not. Who knows? It's the
no,
internet.
I have seen that from you on the Facebook group more than once. You know, like, don't touch that, or I don't touch that, or are you sure you want to touch that?
Right, right, right.
Yeah, and really that's a great space to for me, like I think that's a great space to hear that. Hey, I want to modify this. And then somebody who knows a little bit more comes along and says, you know, you might think twice about that.
Right. And I'm a big problem solver. I love solving problems. I hate unsolved problems. And it's so frustrating for me to have to say that, but do no harm.
Yeah,
First, do no harm.
right. I do want to take a second, Michelle. You are quiet and a black square. Is there anything you want to weigh in on this?
I am new to the assistive technology world and just trying to learn some things. So I am attending as many webinars and things that I possibly can to just learn from
Yeah.
all of the people who've been doing it for forever. So when I saw
Where are
this
you?
pop up, thought I'd try it.
Yeah, where do you work? What state are you in?
I am in New Jersey. I work at Rutgers.
Okay. Yeah, so obviously this is you know, maybe not your best first stop,
We got a little
especially
bit
with
of
Ken
tangential
hanging out with
argument.
us today, being the Eeyore of the group.
I've done
It's eager.
the other things that come out through the NJ had listserv from you know, from this kind of from ATAC. So I just thought, why not hear what people are kind of trying to do? It's very interesting. So and I'm not building anything, so I don't need a lawyer.
Oh, yes, you do.
Everyone needs a lawyer. We should all have lawyers.
Maybe 2 or 3.
Yes.
Working in university, like I would even want to like trying to even talk to the legal team here, like they don't care about us.
Well, I
done.
will say we usually talk about 3D printing or other you know, low
Forms of
tech
fabrication.
options. You know, Jessica has a variety of low tech, really cool stuff that she often talks about, but today we get liability. And it is, I mean, it is a topic that actually, so I've just started like coming together with Gail Bowser, who wants to look at this as a like, how do you help somebody with what I'm calling a decision tree of when to make something and when not to make something? You know, Ken and I have experienced some young people being over enthusiastic and quite frankly terrifying me with some of their like, I'm going to do this. What was that robotic? They wanted to make a robotic hat putter, you know, Donner Doffer, for a guy who I think had quadriplegia, and I think Ken and I both kind of went white and we're like, maybe not robotics near somebody's head for a first time project.
Oh, that reminds me of
that.
one. Yeah, similar situation, except it was for a drinking tube. The guy would have spasms and move it, and they wanted it to robotically follow and stay by his mouth, which is really cool and really hard to solve. But
Sometimes I feel like just like the personal caregiver touch is just a little safer than some robotics, I feel like. Yeah.
And they're insured, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of so anyway, looking at all these, like, how do you help somebody who doesn't have a whole lot of background or information make a good decision? You know, you're never going to solve, well, in my mind, you're never going to completely solve this liability issue, but how do you keep somebody on the, you know, the upside of that do no harm, you know? because you can have lots of enthusiasm and good intent and go down a path that is just, to me, in my mind, is fraught with dangers and then liabilities.
Yeah, you see that with a lot of tech stuff, move fast and break things. This is not a situation where we may want to move fast, but we don't want to break things.
Or, yeah, even if you are, don't involve an end user, somebody with complex needs. If you want to make a robotic Donner Doffer, great, field test it for a year, on everybody else before you get to that end user, like put your own head under there as someone who can duck.
Eat your own dog food. Eat your own dog.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So those stories are all sad because the engineering professors aren't doing their jobs. They're not overseeing this stuff. They're not cutting it short if somebody's going down the wrong path. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish other than an easy semester.
Well, but if you'll recall, Ken, that the engineers were coming in later on this project. These were, as I recall, OT students.
But when the engineers come in, their professors need to come in too. So these are not even engineers these are green engineers. They're so green, they're environmentally safe. I don't know, but they've never been in the real world. So those professors need to do their work, and they're just not. I've seen this in all kinds of settings, Scott, including in facilities near me. They're trying to serve people with disabilities. They go to University of Colorado, and they try to work with some groups there, but the professors just aren't doing their job. Maybe the professors are green for all I know. So I have another request. I'm pretty close to completing this page on my website called Making Assistive Technology. And I've tried to list there all of the learnings I've had about what it means to be a maker of assistive technology. And I mean, a maker of DIY assistive technology. Maybe that answers the point there, Ron. DIY, do it yourself. And I'd be curious to get feedback from people about anything I'm missing or if they really disagree with it.
So it's not on your website yet?
I'm disagreeing.
I'm sorry, I missed both those.
You can go ahead, Scout.
I said, so this is not on your website yet?
It is. I go ahead and I edit on the fly, so it's public. It's there. It's in the top navigation bar, Making AT.
Okay, I will take a look at that. I actually would be very interested in looking at that. Yeah, and then I think, then how do you get that out to folks is the next thing. So like, let's just say this page on your website becomes, the definitive line for deciding how to determine whether a project
it's not that. It's not how, well, there's a little bit of that. Okay. What is a good fit, what's not a good fit. But it's not a decision tree like had somebody brought up. It's not that sophisticated. In fact, if there's such a thing, I'd love to know about it and include a reference to it.
Yeah. Well, that's what was my term for like what might come out of my work with Gail Bowser.
Okay. I linked Ken's page in the chat. I noticed the first thing I noticed was the very interesting picture you have yourself, Ken, on the top of the page there. But I'll get to
appropriate.
The soapbox picture, I suppose.
So I do hope to get this out because it's one of the proposals I made to Shannon and Cole's conference. Yep. Now, so I want to present this as well, but I thought it's time for me to just really start documenting my thoughts.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah, and I've looked through it previously, Ken, and I really like what you put together, regardless of what I said earlier.
I thought that was purely ad hominem about me.
Well,
Take it as you will.
take it as you will. Yeah, that's your interpretation.
I guess.
You might well believe
If
that.
the shoe fits. All right, well, okay, after all of this, is there anything else that folks want to talk about? We still have 20 minutes left.
I can show you some of my unsafe switches.
Just put that right up front, Ron. Make that part of the switch name, unsafe switch.
Extremely dangerous switches.
Love it.
Here's my
.com.
use at your own risk, you fool.
Maybe that is the approach, you know. So one of the things one of my potential customers was asking about is, and again, I focus on video games, gaming, that sort of thing, is like when they have the Xbox Adaptive Controller, game designers basically try to use every single button that's possible on a controller. You know, if there are 18 buttons, they're going to have 18 buttons, which really is not very handy for folks. So he wanted kind of a, you know, kind of a, and they already make them for like fighting games, like controllers, big controllers with buttons and joysticks. But it really, those don't work with the adaptive controller, especially since Microsoft killed off most all of the third-party controllers. So what I've come up with is this sort of setup here. And what I'm going to have is modules that sit on top of the Xbox Adaptive Controller. And it's going to be held in place probably with that 3M tape that's removable. It's like a double-face tape, removable tape. And the idea is that I could have different layouts, and this is one of my joysticks that I have that I've mounted inside here. And with this, it's just going to have a boatload of either jacks or plugs coming out of the back of it. And that way the adaptive controller is not touched at all. I have not modified that device at all. So that's one thing I've been playing with. And
Hey, Ron,
yes,
can maybe you demo that at a future meeting?
once it's working, yes.
Okay.
The other thing and this really isn't necessarily ATAC, but I have a lot of crossover between ATAC and digital musicians. They have very, very similar needs. Usually they're trying to control very complicated things easily or on the fly. If you're a DJ and you're trying to control stuff in a live performance, you know, you can't go fiddling through 800 menus to get to something. And it's the same sort of problem you see in a lot of ATEC stuff. So some of the things I've been working on are these little joystick. This is a little Joy-Con joystick with a screen on it, and this will be a MIDI controller. And then I think I've recreated the iPod here.
That's what I was about to say. Like the first thing looked very much like an iPod. Like,
Yeah, I've
not the
completely
Nano, but like
recreated it here. It's a rotary encoder with a push button and 5 buttons, and it has a screen. Now for this, it's going to be for the musicians, but keep in mind these sorts of controls. You know, using these sorts of input. I kind of call myself an input device guy these days. Think about, you know, maybe this weird spinner thing would work if it had the right software to interact with whatever. So keep that in mind. And one more for Ken, when we were talking about parts and whatnot. We have slide potentiometers, right? These are like equalizers, or they set a setting, things like that. They're good. Like if you wanted a throttle control on a game, you could use that. Trouble is they're big, they're hard to press, and they don't spring back. Well, I was looking around the old electronic sites and I found this tiny
Wow.
slide potentiometer, which is, it slides 8 millimeters, so it's got a really small throw and very little pressure. What was this used for? What is this used for? It's an automotive part. My car is not fancy, but I guess on some cars they can auto adjust their headlights. And this is what they use to sense the headlight position.
Dang.
But it's like a perfect AT thing. Low tension, little throw, and like you never know what you're going to come across. And one of the things that I've been messing with, and I'm not happy with it yet, is taking one of those and mounting it in a pseudo button sort of situation where this is actually analog input. So like if you could use like a gas or a brake pedal or, you know, as an accelerator for a game. This is not for controlling a wheelchair. This is only for gaming. But that sort of thing. It's a little grindy than I want it to be. There are analog buttons out there that were designed for arcade games, but they don't have any throw at all. And I had folks asking, you know, I want feedback. You know, it's like pressing a gas pedal in a car. You want feedback on how hard you're pressing it. And so that's using that little part. And I'm going to try to use it in some other stuff too and see what happens. And it's cheap. It's easy. I mean, you have to buy it from an electronics distributor. I get mine from Mauser because they're in Texas. But in quantities of 10, they're like $1.
Wow.
So which is great. I think that's all my immediate stuff for now.
Anybody else have something they want to?
Well, there is a new software I found this week.
Is
It's really hard to pronounce. It's called Cephable or something. It's the octopus tentacle. That one.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know how to pronounce it either.
What is it?
Cephalopod.
Talking to a worker and they said it once, but I would never remember how to pronounce it. This is
Cephable, I think it is.
yeah. It was I noticed, of course, after they did the thing on it for the NJ cart. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, and was having trouble with it, and I ended up talking to the CEO and he helped me get set up.
So what does it do?
So it tracks your head, so like you can make it do functions on the computer. Can I screen share and show?
Probably. I think I don't know. Naomi would have to.
Oh, it's up. I can do it.
Okay.
So there's different profiles you make. So this is one that they helped me make for using Google Slides. So if I tilt my head this way, I'll go to the next slide. If I tilt my head this way, I'll go to the last.
Oh, okay.
But if I
Is
make
it
a profile,
Jessica?
yeah,
Jessica's it just using your webcam?
yes.
Okay.
And then they also have modes where you can shake your phone, tap buttons on your phone, like open your mouth and it'll do stuff. It does the head tilt. Let me show you.
So how many?
Oh, you see, it can do all that.
Oh, so my question is, can you use more than one movement to do more than so like if my head does slides back and forth, can opening my mouth do something else?
So let me show you something else on there.
I think so, say.
Yeah, I think so. So when you go into one that's already made, so like if we want to do writing and editing on the Mac, so you see all this? So if I can turn on the camera or I can turn on the microphone or both. And you see when it says that, like you can say all these things and it'll get it to the voicing to work. It supposedly works, but doesn't work for me.
Okay.
And then you see on these, you can tilt your head to get it to do stuff.
Oh, you could do either one. You could do a
Yeah.
head tilt or left. Okay.
And then you can use, I have the compatible app on my phone. So I can also have buttons come up on my phone and I can just press it.
Okay,
And then,
well, that's cool.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of folks mention this. A couple of gamers have gotten into it, and it's like a less expensive version of eye gaze.
it's free. It's free unless it's
It's free.
for like a company or something.
Right.
We just download it to the computer. It's hard to set up though. I needed help setting it up, but
Yeah, and they used to have a hardware component, which they no longer do. I don't know I can't remember what the hardware component did.
at least the camera works really well for me. I
Yeah,
haven't tried the thing where I can shake my phone or tap the buttons on my phone, but
Okay. Naomi, did New Jersey do a spotlight, a tech spotlight on this? Okay, that's what I thought. So yeah, and that's recorded, correct? And that would be in the webinars?
Yes, I just put it in the chat.
Okay, great. So if you want to learn more, you can, look at that webinar done.
But I also just talked to the CEO like 2 days ago, and he pretty much gave me the grand tour of this. So
Nice. That's the way to do it, huh?
mm-hmm.
Go right to the top.
Because they have a Discord, and I reached out to them in the Discord, and he was the one that said, "Yeah, I'll show you."
Nice. Well, that's great. If as they get bigger, that'll probably be harder to do. Yeah, so I think the
It kind of does like what Apple Accessibility does on the
Right.
Mac, but
Well,
I feel
that's what
like
I
you
was-
get more options.
right. That's why I was asking, because the Apple Accessibility, you just choose one gesture, is my understanding. And then you have access to one thing you can do.
But the Apple Accessibility has always been really hard for me to navigate because you have to turn on like multiple things and there's like so many options. So I'm kind of happy I found this because it's a little easier for me to understand now that I know how to do it.
Good. Well, that's cool. Thanks for sharing that. And so we can check that out or go to the ATAC website and look at that tech spotlight as well. It's very cool. All right. Anybody else working on anything? Cole, what are you doing?
Not working on necessarily an individual project, but kind of what Ron and Ken were referring to is down here in Texas. Shannon and I, as well as another colleague, Nico, started essentially something similar to this group, but like essentially what we're trying to do is trying to get as many Texas makers as we can across, individuals, libraries, makerspaces to kind of essentially thinking about coming together with AT professionals to think about like individualized AT solutions that could be made by makers as opposed to like traditional manufacturing. So that's kind of what we're doing. So they're kind of doing a monthly meeting. Had somebody from a really great presentation from somebody who's a founder of an AT consulting firm here in Austin. And then next month, actually having Ken speak on some of his projects. So yeah, so that's kind of what we're doing down in Texas as well.
Yeah, I just heard about your tacos and tamales and
yes. So I will say I was not the one who created the acronym. It's basically short for Texas Assistive Technology Makers Alliance. So I will credit Shannon for the name.
It's a very forced acronym. Very.
It is. It is. I would agree, but it's what people remember, I suppose.
It's memorable, yeah. The little.
It's memorable, and we already have like a mascot. We have like a basically. Shannon had gotten on Canva and did like the AI like it was basically it's like a tamale in a cowboy hat. So we already have kind of the branding around it, but yeah.
Well, that's cool. Did you drop? I mean, is there something that you can put in the chat?
Yes, let me go ahead and
Because then we can all bug you. on
Yes,
YouTube
thank
while we do
you.
it.
I might need to edit the link to the sign up for the Zooms, but like the first meeting can be accessed on the TTAP YouTube page, and then looking to upload the most recent meeting pretty soon. So basically the first meeting was just kind of getting an introduction to Assistive Technology for makers who might not be familiar. The second meeting was kind of thinking about the relationship that makers can have with AT professionals. So that's kind of, so you're doing some guest speakers, and then kind of ideally in the future, being able to more solidly connect makers with projects is the ideal hope for sure.
I have a I don't know, I'm not going to call it a gripe. I have a concern, and not about tamales.
Yeah.
But about a lot of this stuff is that because it's state funded, it's at the state level.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and I and there are at there may be a lot of AT makers out there, but there aren't that many really active, you know, like the Kens and the Rons of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It's much harder to find those, as individuals as opposed to no.
Right. So it's really, I don't know. I don't think that problem can be solved, but I think it's, even though it's funded and specific for an area, a state,
Yes.
we have to be open to people all over the world.
I do agree with that for sure.
Because that's where the expertise is. It's spread all over the place.
For sure.
And my God, I know there's a ton of makers in Austin, and I've been having a hell of a time recruiting people, which is very frustrating.
No, yeah, it is. It's a slow building process for sure. But
recruiting people to do what specifically, Ron?
To get general makers into the ATAC world. Like, as I always say, I was sick of making clocks and making useless, basically at the end of the day, useless stuff just because it was cool. I'd much rather build stuff that's actually helping somebody. And sure, there's plenty of traditional stuff that helps people. You build a bench, it allows them to sit down. That's great. But it's this ATAC thing has been I've only been doing it for coming up 2 years. And it has been the most satisfying work that I've ever done. Which is probably not, it's probably a pretty low bar considering I used to work for a lot of insurance companies. So, but still.
My boring life until AT.
Until AT, yeah. Oh my God, helping people, it's just amazing. And
I used to have really bad mental health until I started doing AT stuff, and then it kept me busy.
Yep, exactly. It's like I always have a new problem to solve. I have more problems to solve than even in my little limited world, than I'll ever be able to figure out. Yeah. So that's where I'm trying to get more makers to say, you know what, let's have more people, and I'm focused more on the electronics side of things and programming, but getting people involved. Well, and this is where the conversations we're having with Ken and with Cole and everything else to how do you bring those people in? How do you make sure to bring them in safely? And, so they don't try to break something.
Right. Well, I think that is, I think the collaborations and what's the guy you referenced earlier, the AT evangelist, it's like how do you bring people in? How do you make it safe? How do you get more stuff done? But staying in the lane. I don't know. It's a good topic for another time. It is 11:59 or 1 minute before the hour, depending on where you are. And so we probably should wrap up. But lots of good resources in the chat today. So I'm gonna save that quickly. And I'm gonna read your stuff, Ken, and get back with you on my 2 cents, or maybe 5. Anybody else have any last minute comments? All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Oh, Jessica does.
Love the Bucky switch. Not nice Texas Tech there. I love it.
We went to one during ATIA.
All right, and on that, all right, everybody. Thanks, and